Hello, I'm Barbara Sills Nevergold, co-founder of the Uncrowned Queens Institute. Welcome to They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders. This program brings you the inspiring and sometimes little-known stories of the women and men who have made or are making a difference in our community through their contributions and accomplishments in the arts, business, healthcare, education, politics, media, advocacy, and so much more. Each week, we have the pleasure of talking to another person of accomplishment and contribution. Accomplishment because of all that they have done in thought, word, and deed, and contribution because of all they've given back to the community. An uncrowned community builder because we have not properly recognized, celebrated, and commended these individuals for a life that exemplifies the unspoken gifts they represent. Now, today's guest is a woman who is a master networker. In fact, as I recall, we first connected at TJ Maxx while we were bargain shopping. Over the last 15 to 20 years, I've had the pleasure to work with her on several projects and know her as a hardworking and innovative entrepreneur and as a tireless community advocate who personifies the expression, nevertheless, she persisted. It's a pleasure to welcome Jennifer Jackson Parker to They've Got Stories to Tell. Hi, Jen.
Thank you very much. And I'm just looking at that beautiful scarf you have on it.
Thank you.
And I said, I wonder if that's a TJ Maxx special.
It could be. It could be. Now, Jennifer, I know that you're not a Buffalonian, originally from Buffalo, but tell us about how you got here to make Buffalo your home.
I tell everyone it was love. Love brought me to Buffalo.
Okay.
As you know, Buffalo is full of people from the South and the African American community. And my mother-in-law is originally from North Carolina, which exposed my husband to the great state of North Carolina. So when I went to undergrad, there was a whole community of Buffalo people at Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's when we met. Okay. And I got to visit Buffalo, and then later on in my senior year, he proposed. And then I tell people we both decided we wanted to go to law school, and law school was our honeymoon. And our first year of marriage, we were in UB Law School together.
Oh my goodness. Well, we always like to ask our guests a little bit about their background because, as you said, so many of us came from the South and relocated. But every once in a while, there's someone on the show who's a native-born Buffalonian, too. And so, it's good to connect that way.
Yes.
But, as so many other women in this city, across the country, Black women especially, you have such a rich life in terms of what you've done and what you're continuing to do. So we're going to talk about some of those things, but as I say to so many of my guests, we're probably going to run out of time before we get through, and so you're going to have to come back. I'm going to say that up front. Usually I say it at the end of the program.
Okay.
But when you and I first met, you were you had developed a company that you called Black Capital Network, and it was teaching aspiring entrepreneurs about networking, about entrepreneurship, and so forth. So tell us, a little bit about Black Capital Network. I know it's still going. About the empowerment conferences that you used to do too.
Oh gosh, I still have that network of speakers that came in because they understood what we were doing, and with the really depressing data that's out there now about in a few years, they say most minorities are going to be broke. And so the whole effort and the vision for the Black Capital Network was to encourage people to build wealth in our community through entrepreneurship. And if you were not interested in entrepreneurship, at least personal wealth creation and passing that wealth down, whether it's a home that is fully paid for and owned, and just being aware of like what we call it, economic empowerment. And it was such a joy. And what we do now, Jackson Parker Communications grew out of that part because I had such a dedication to working with small minority businesses. And so, and I would focus on what came natural to me, which is my creativity. So that's how Jackson Parker Communications evolved. But in reference to the Black Capital Network, every year I do pro bono for free I work with 2 small businesses.
Oh,
for
okay.
free. And I do that under the Black Capital
Yes, and
Network.
I've seen some of the work, and we'll talk about that. But I think that certainly my colleague Peggy and I, again, really early on, were learning from you and benefiting from the work you were doing, because
Vice versa.
because the empowerment piece even speaks to those who are not necessarily wanting to go into business,
That's true.
but who want to take a look at their careers and see how they can become more effective
That's
in
it.
their careers. So you helped in that way. You inspired people. You mentored people, and that's
great to know.
that's another area that we need in our
We
community.
need
the
it
mentorship.
greatly. Yes.
And also, I recall being a part of something called the Harlem Book Fair in Buffalo. And that was such an exciting, remember the summer that we were outside when we had a summer in Buffalo?
Yes.
And you organized this book fair that was a replication of one that's held in Harlem.
Yes.
Famous. So tell us about the Buffalo version of the Harlem Book Fair.
Well, the Harlem Book Fair came out of the fact that I was a new member of the Convention and Visitors Bureau Board, which is now called Visit Buffalo Niagara. And at the same time, it was 2005, we were celebrating the centennial of the Niagara movement.
That's right.
And Europeans were calling all over the world about what was happening in Buffalo. Nothing had been planned. So I said, you know what? Let's bring in the Harlem Book Fair from Harlem. And because C-SPAN was a part of them, and it was a great way to bring in authors who had written about the Underground Railroad, who had written about the Niagara movement and the NAACP, and that's how it started. But we realized in order to bring this, a lot of people think that the Harlem Book Fair just came freely. No, they said if we're coming to your city,
Nothing comes
you
free,
have
right?
to raise money.
Yes.
So putting the network together, working with Uncrowned Queens builders, you and Peggy, working with the library, WNED, and some of the city government leaders, we were able to put enough dollars together. And we had some corporate sponsors too, but we had to go out, I should say myself, had to go out and raise those dollars and say it deserved to be here.
And I remember again because
guys
Uncrowned
was
Queens was celebrating the centennial of the Niagara movement all year long.
Yes.
That was such a wonderful opportunity for us to share books and articles that we had written.
That's true.
Again, bringing the community together to celebrate such a significant historical event in this community, was so important.
And hopefully we got some book lovers out of that, because
Yes.
once you find a subject that you really like, we always say we hope that really stimulated a spark. That then you become a book lover because you want to keep digging in and find out more.
That's right. I'm sure it did. Well, we have come to the point where we need to take a break right now. So this went very quickly, but stay tuned. Come back after this brief message, and we'll talk some more with Jennifer Parker.
Movement. Along with weight loss, it's one of the many ways to fight osteoarthritis pain. For more information on managing pain, go to fightarthritispain.
Hello, I'm Barbara Sills Nevergold, and welcome back to They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders. And we're having a great conversation today with Jennifer Parker, Jennifer
Yes.
Jackson Parker.
Thank
we're gonna
you
talk
very
about
much.
And we were talking at the end about the Harlem Book Fair and the fact that in Buffalo and that was 2005.
It went to, the last one was in 2010. Remember in 2007, James Earl Jones made an
Yes.
appearance?
Yes, that's right. I do.
Because he had narrated some books. And you know, he's already was the voice of Star Wars, you know, in
Yes.
Star Wars, but he was a great narrator. And, you know, he has a place in, I think, upstate New York. And so that's how we was able to reach out to him. But,
Interesting.
Yes.
Well,
Remember
let's,
he read
let's
a
move.
few books?
Yes, I do now. You know, that having these conversations kind of jogs the memory.
Jog the
and brings
memory,
it back.
and then we get excited.
But let's fast forward a little bit to
Okay.
another innovation that you've had really in terms of your advocacy for young people in this community, and the fact that you have developed a program
Yes.
called Success Looks Like Me.
Yes.
And that program really, well, I guess tell us about what
know
that
what?
looks like.
That was a 6-year, you know, I'm part of a group called the Communities of Giving Legacy Initiative. And that the whole mission was to help students living in low-income communities of color to provide them access to people, places, and experiences. Emphasis on the word access.
Right.
And that's what Success Looks Like Me came from, because really, Barbara, when I was growing up in the South, there was many teachers, nothing wrong with being a teacher,
Right.
ministers, and there was a lack of access to other professions. So I went into college and I went to law school not really having enough of directions about where you want to go. But if you have that access to people, places, and experiences early, and especially if that access include seeing people that look like you in that profession, then you can say, aha, I can do this too. And that was the whole premises. And really what brought it full circle as tech was really rising. I had a conversation with Steve Finch, the former general manager of General Motors Tonawanda Engine, and I told him my vision to be able to have a group of students to go to Detroit, to their headquarters, to see people of color in engineering roles, and so they opened the door, because I knew that General Motors and Fords, they see themselves now as more of a technology company, okay? So their evolution, and let me tell you, I never knew a trip could change a child's life.
Yes. Well, I know that some of those children are Buffalo school children, and I recall a group coming to speak to the board after the trip.
Yes.
And they expressed, again, such excitement, and also the way it built on their knowledge about how they could use skills, for example, as an artist. Someone that had interest in art, but never thought about car design as a potential career.
Who would have known?
So, yes. So that exposure for those children really, as you said, just opened up a whole new world for them that they might not have, and probably more than might not, probably not been exposed to. So I'm just so grateful to you for having the vision to do that, because so many young people's lives have been positively changed forever as a result of that program.
What's so important is people like yourself, Steve Finch, people who embrace the vision. There were staff members of First Niagara that embraced the vision, and they said, we want to help too, you know? And so that helps, just like with the book fair. Anything you do, you can have a vision, but you have to have a team to embrace that vision and help it come true. When you said the Buffalo Public Schools, there's one little young man that was the youngest student to go on that first trip. When you talk to him, he would just look down at his shoes. That young man got a full scholarship at RIT, and he's going to be working at Apple for the summer. He was a computer genius.
Fantastic. So what we need now is, in terms of Success Looks Like You, is a written summary of some of those stories. You know, that would be a great thing to share one, with funders.
Yes.
But secondly, with the community, because so often, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this show is so often these kinds of stories really don't get the attention that they need to get. So what you've done, yes, you don't do it for your own aggrandizement, you do it for the community and for the children in the community. At the same time, it should be recognized and it should continue, and the way it continues has to do with how you get resources and support for it.
Well, I know 2 people I can pull into a book project because you guys have already done it. Your Uncrowned
That's
Queen
right.
building books, you and Peggy Bertrand.
But think about that. We'll think about that
very
in the
important.
future, and then maybe we'll come back
Of
again.
course, when I call both of you.
Right. So a little bit earlier in the show, we were talking about the Black Capital Network, and then
Yes.
you mentioned that has evolved now perhaps into Jackson Parker
Yes, indeed.
Communications. So that is your company where you're
Yes.
doing marketing.
Yes, public
And PR.
relations and marketing is we call integrated communications because in this busy world, there's so much noise out there. And it used to be you can just put an ad in the newspaper and say in every building and they'll come. It doesn't happen that way because people don't all get their news in the same place. There are some people that get their news on social media. There's some that read community newspapers. There's some that only read the major newspapers. Some just television. So there's so many ways, so you have to touch everyone. That's what we call it, integrated communications. And that's what I utilize. And I still have a passion a lot of times to help the smaller businesses go from small to hopefully a larger business. That's what, I really enjoy 3 years of being an inclusion consultant with 43 North because I got to travel the United States to encourage women and people of color to apply to the 43 North competition and also talk to Buffalonians about how rich entrepreneurship was, and you just saw this entrepreneurship spirit just grow, and people just really focus on growing their businesses.
But
So
it's
been
also
great.
a lot of work, and
Oh, yes.
and you do things such as help people with their business plan, which is
Yes.
fundamental to a small business or any
Yes.
business.
It's that roadmap. And I said a lot of people get scared of a business plan because they say, oh, I got to, unless you go into the bank for money, you don't have to do this long drawn out form of business plan. The guy who started Amazon, his business plan was on a napkin, okay? Long as you have I said, just jot down some bullet points. Where am I going this year? How I'm going to get there, and just start that way.
All right, and so to my audience now, you just got this advice free. So stay tuned because we're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk with Jennifer Parker about another exciting project she's working on.
Save a place for me, save a space for me in your heart, in your heart.
Every year, the United Negro College Fund helps thousands of students go to college. But for everyone we help, there's one we can't. Please support the United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Hi, this is Barbara Sills Nevergold, and this is They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders. If you're just joining us, my guest today is Jennifer Jackson Parker, and we've been talking about all the exciting things that Jennifer has done and is doing, in the Buffalo community around entrepreneurship and networking and PR and marketing, et cetera. So one of the projects recently that you have assisted with in marketing and promoting is the Blackness Project. And if you haven't heard about that, Corey Green is the inspiration behind that. And tell us about the Blackness Project because it's an exciting
It's an exciting project. And it's another project that you've helped with. Like I said, you can have the vision. Corey shared his vision. I brought into the vision. You and Peggy brought in the vision. Alnisa with the Challenger. It's like it takes, what does it say? Take a village to really make it happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Blackness Project, these young men from Buffalo, led by Corey Green. They saw the film, The Whiteness Project, that was based on 21 Caucasians from Buffalo that shared their perceived concern about the loss of white privilege. And their reaction was, oh my gosh, there needs to be another side to this. And that's how the Blackness Project was born. And then that was 2.5 years ago. And they came to me and they told me about their vision. And I said, this is really bigger than Buffalo. At that time, there was the eruption, the Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Mr. Gardner in New York. It was so much concern going on. I said, it's really bigger than Buffalo. I said, you know, put your pennies together, raise your money, and go on the road and talk to other people in reference to some of what you're doing. And so what came out of it was a bigger project. And they divided, as you know, into chapters, and really ended up being almost like give people a glance of the history of race relations in America. And not to give everything away, but as you've seen the film, what was kind of sad was to hear that civil rights speech that President John Kennedy had given in 1968 about, I think, you know, it was 65, I believe, about really the state of race relations in America. And when he was talking, so that's in the film, then you realize, oh my goodness.
It's like it was today.
Yes, and it had been 50 years since Martha Luther, it was 60, there were some kids that were in the, at the event, the screening, and they did a poem, a spoken word poem about 50 years, and it was 50 years since Martin Luther King had passed in '68.
Right.
And I may have got the John F. Kennedy.
And he died in '63, so
yeah, so it had to
before
be
that. Yeah,
it was. I think it was that year.
May have been. Well,
because they didn't want his campaign didn't want him to do it.
Yeah.
To get so far into the civil rights, so it had to be like 63 or 62.
Yeah. You know, as you said, the project and your work with helping to make sure that to get out the
messaging, the right messaging,
right, because
yes.
Again, the dialogue around race relations is
kinda
very
sensitive.
difficult. It's sensitive. It's difficult.
Yes, it is.
And the divide between groups of people now in our
Yes,
society,
in our society.
you know, are so deep and
Yes.
so erosive or
Yes.
corrosive, I
Yes,
should say.
that's what it is.
You know, to relationships. But you know that to me is what you're doing with the Blackness Project. It's a courageous effort. And certainly, you know, one of the things I said about you earlier was the community advocate. And that and the Success Looks Like Me project, all of those are, you know, such important contributions to this community.
Thank
I don't know, I mean, I know that you did not create the film,
No.
but the venues to provide the talk back and exchange
It's
is
important.
Yeah.
And the messaging, I do all of their press releases and I come up with the messaging that's going to resonate with the community, okay? And so we have reached out so the film can be seen in other cities. They're going to open a film festival in Detroit this summer at the Charles Wright Museum. They're going to be in Philadelphia. They're going to be in Chicago, you know. And so we're looking at Baltimore and Atlanta. And each city that hosts, and we're looking at 2 venues in New York City. And each venue, we tell everyone it's important to have a community panel to talk about a facilitated discussion after the film. That's the whole thing. The film wanted to have this conversation.
Right, right. That's critical. That's exciting. I didn't know that you had branched out so much across the country. That's exciting. So
Yes.
when you have time, I know you're a new grandmother. We're coming to the end of the show, so I want people to know you're a new grandmother, and your granddaughter is how old now?
She just turned a year, but she's in Dublin, but she'll be moving back to the States soon in Seattle, because my son works at Amazon.
All right.
Born in Buffalo. Yeah, he loves Buffalo.
Very good.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, as usual, this conversation that I have with my guests goes so quickly, and I've so
enjoyed it.
appreciate your time and the fact that we've had some time to talk today. Hopefully, again, we may redo this, and if you have time in the future. But I appreciate you. I appreciate the audience who's joined us today. And I've got to say, this has been They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders, a program of the Uncrowned Queens Institute. We invite and encourage you to visit our website at www.uncrownedcommunitybuilders.com to learn more about the lives and contributions of the uncrowned queens and kings we are spotlighting in this program. You can also watch this program on the UCB YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/uncrownedqueens. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us next week for another edition of They've Got Stories to Tell.